going to talk today about healthy eating, obviously for heart disease because I work at the Hart Foundation, but everything that I'm going to be talking about today is really about healthy eating for everyone, for the whole population, and also really about helping you feel good. It's about healthy ageing. So all of the recommendations that I'll provide are really broad and general for the population, whether you have heart disease or not. Oh, sorry, my height. It's often a problem. So, as I said, I work at the Hart Foundation, and for those of you who haven't heard of the Hart Foundation, we're a charity organisation, and the organisation aims to reduce the death and suffering from heart disease, stroke and blood vessel disease. And the work that we do really focuses on building and creating healthier environments for all of Australians, and also specific work like preventing heart attack and also teaching people about the warning signs of heart attack too. And we do this through engaging with the government, we do this through our funding of a lot of amazing research, and we also provide a lot of resources for the community. Just some little stats about heart disease. It's the largest single cause of death in Australia, so it affects each year 24,000 people die of heart disease. And about 1.4 million people are living with heart disease, and that's, I guess, what's more important in terms of it does affect lifestyle and can be, living with taking different medications, can be affected by their not being able to be as active as they'd like to be, and also some people can experience depression and anxiety when they experience heart disease. But the good news is that 80% of heart disease is actually preventable, and I'm going to be talking about one aspect of things we can change in our lifestyle, which is healthy eating for the prevention of heart disease. So what are the risk factors? We've heard a lot about physical activity, and that's definitely one of the risk factors for increasing chances of a heart attack. There's really two kind of types of risk factors, things that you can't do anything about, like your genetics and your family history. You can't change that. But 90% of us, so 90% of Australians, have a risk factor that we can change. So things like smoking and also what I'm going to talk about today, which is diet and being overweight. So things we can do something about. So just having a look at diet, I guess, what are Australians eating? And we've been really lucky to recently, last month actually, have some amazing new research that has come out to show what Australians are eating. And this is research that hasn't been done since 1995, so really, really interesting and important for us. And one of the main findings that came from that is about a third of our daily energy intake, so this is a third of what we eat daily, or our daily food intake, comes from things that we call discretionary foods. And discretionary foods, what that means is they're extra foods in the diet that we don't need, basically. They're not part of our core requirements for health and don't provide any vitamins or minerals and things that we need for daily health. And these include foods such as alcohol, cakes, muffins, desserts, confectionery like lollies, soft drinks and flavoured waters. And actually one of the biggest things that made up that percentage overall was soft drinks, which is really interesting. Another really interesting finding that came from that is the amount of people that are dieting as well. And even in the over 50 age group, about 19 or 20% of women were on some kind of diet. And that's, I think a really interesting finding, and hopefully that's what I can help talk about a little bit about today, is that whole balance and healthy eating that doesn't have to be a diet as such. The other really, really interesting thing that came out of that is that about 90% of us, so most people, are not eating the recommended amount of vegetables each day. We need 5 serves a day, that's the recommendation. So only about 10% of the population gets that, which is a bit scary, I think. So what I'll focus on today is really simple changes. That's what I want the take-home message from today to be, is that it doesn't have to be hard because, I guess eating, just like physical activity, as Janique presented, is also complex behaviour that involves many different factors and isn't always easy because of the environment that is around us and the options that we have available. But simple changes can really make a difference, and that may mean having 1 more serve of vegetables, having an extra piece of fruit each day. If you have takeaway a couple of times a week, having it once a week instead. Or it might mean not skipping meals and making sure that you eat regularly. Eating fresh is also really important. So fresh, the most that you can. And choosing foods with healthier fats, I'm going to focus on that quite a bit, so I'll go into the detail of that. And also choosing reduced, low or no fat dairy products. And there's lots of recipes on the Hart Foundation website as well that can help with some of these simple changes. We have government guidelines for healthy eating, and they were just released last year. They're evidence-based guidelines that have involved years of research to develop them, and they're called the Australian Dietary Guidelines, and all of the Hart Foundation recommendations for healthy eating are pretty much in line or align exactly with these Australian dietary guidelines. So overall, there's quite a few recommendations in the guidelines. You can get a really big, giant book on it. But some of the simple take-home things from that is that we need to enjoy a wide variety of nutritious foods. And I always think for variety, colour, the more colour you have is better. So especially with fruit and vegetables, the more colour that you can get every day in what you're eating and with your fruit and vegetables, and the more variety, the better off you're going to be. And mostly plant-based foods, so whole grains, legumes, lentils, fruit and veg is what we should be eating most of. And limiting intake of foods that have saturated fat, salt and sugars, and they're the things that I'm going to go into now just to explain what that means. So fats and cholesterol. This is a really important message from the Hart Foundation. So one of our key recommendations is around fats and healthy fats. The good news about this recommendation is that not all fats need to be cut out or avoided or limited, and we actually do need some fat in our diet. It's really, really important. The most important thing to remember is that there's different types of fat. So the word fat doesn't mean the same for every different type of food. There are a lot of different types. So there's actually 3 different types. We've got your saturated fat, and that's the unhealthy type of fat. And then there's poly and monounsaturated fats, which you may have heard of. And they're the healthier types of fats. What we recommend is to limit the saturated fat. And the reason this is recommended is because it's shown to have increased blood cholesterol and have a risk for heart disease. So the recommendation overall is limiting that saturated fat. Do you know where that comes from? Yep, I heard animal products, and that's exactly it. Most of the saturated fat from our diet comes from animal foods, so things like, you'll actually see it on meat, the white sort of fat on the meat. It's that hard type of fat coming from animal products, and dairy as well. But there's actually 2 plant-based oils that we have called palm oil and coconut oil that are high in saturated fat. Now, palm oil is a really interesting one because it's used really widely in our food supply. So a lot of manufacturers use palm oil because it's quite cheap to use, and it also works really well chemically for food. And it's used in a lot of really highly processed foods. So things like chocolate, crisps, biscuits, all those type of really processed foods usually contain palm oil. And that's sort of what we can call the hidden saturated fat. So yes, we know about animal foods containing saturated fat, but the palm oil is a challenge because it is a little bit more hidden. The take-home message would be less processed foods and more of the fresh foods. As I said, it's not all bad news. There are healthy fats and oils, and we recommend replacing some of the unhealthy of saturated fat with the healthier fats and oils, and they're the poly and monounsaturated fats. Do you know where they come from? You can see it up there. Give you a hint. Yeah. So plant-based. So things like olive oil, canola, sunflower, safflower oils, nuts, fish as well, avocado contain these healthier oils and provide all of the nutrients that go with fats that are really important in a really healthy way that lowers blood cholesterol and is good for the heart and good for health overall. Actually have many other different functions that are important for the body. So that's what we recommend, to try and include more of these every day. Fish is a type of, or contains a healthier type of fat. It's one of the polyunsaturated fats, and you might have heard of omega-3s. I'm sure you've probably heard of omega-3, and that's what oily fish contains a lot of, is this omega-3, which is very protective against heart disease and a lot of other conditions as well, and really important for our bodies. We recommend having oily fish, which includes things like sardines, blue-eyed trevally, tuna, canned tuna, and salmon, 2 or 3 times a week is what's recommended from the Hart Foundation. I'll just go back on that one because I did want to also mention eggs, because I get a lot of questions about eggs. How many eggs can we have? And eggs are also contain a lot of the beneficial fats that I was talking about. So they are high in the mono and the polyunsaturated fats. Sometimes people feel concerned about having eggs because they contain something called cholesterol. And we actually know that cholesterol in food, so dietary cholesterol, doesn't have a huge impact on blood cholesterol and on the heart. It's much more about the saturated fat than cholesterol in food. So we say 6 or 7 eggs a week is absolutely fine, and that's exactly what the Australian Dietary Guidelines says as well. And most people, in a sitting would 2 eggs would be a serve if you're having a scrambled eggs or something. So, having that a couple of times a week's no problem. Just wanted to mention carbohydrates and sugar, and I think sugar really important because it's been in the media a lot lately. We're getting at the Hart Foundation a lot of media inquiries, a lot of questions all the time about sugar and, is it bad and what does it do? And so I think it's really important to talk about that. Sugar is a type of carbohydrate, and carbohydrate foods are really important for us, but there's 2 different types. That's what's important to remember. You've got starchy sort of carbohydrates, so things that are like bread and cereal, pasta, rice, and then sugary foods that also contain carbohydrate and provide the body with energy. We recommend that both the amount of carbohydrate that you have and the type is really important. And the type of carbohydrate that is recommended for good health and for heart disease prevention is go for whole grains, really. So things like grainy bread, legumes and lentils, vegetables, rice, pasta, things like that will contain whole grains that are really important, and limit some of the sugary foods that are highly refined, so soft drinks. And as you've seen from what we're eating today, soft drinks are making up quite a bit of our diet, and that's something we recommend to limit for sure. Yeah. going to say something, but I forgot now. Salt is another important nutrient that's really important for heart disease prevention and for overall health as well. We know that salt has a strong link with blood pressure, so it's quite a strong evidence to show that salt can increase blood pressure. And we do know also that in Australia we have about double the amount of salt that's recommended each day. So people are eating roughly about 9-10 grams of salt a day, and the recommendation's about 4 to 6 grams of salt. So we've got a long way to go, really. But the other thing we know about salt is that a lot of it is hidden, and a lot of it comes from processed foods. About 75% of the salt that we eat comes from foods that we eat every day that are processed. So things like bread even contain quite a bit of salt. And really the take-home messages about salt is look at food labels. And that's really one of the ways that you can help to reduce the amount of salt that you're having. One of the easy ways to do that is to go for things that are reduced salt, low salt, or no added salt. But also one of the other ways is looking at the actual label on a food packet. Has everyone looked at the labels when they've been in the supermarket? Yeah, that's the challenge. It really is challenging because the writing is so small. Have you seen that thing called the Nutrition Information Panel? When you turn it around? Yeah. So on the back of there, if you can read it, and some packets are larger and more helpful with that, always look at the column that says per 100 gram. And if you look at that column, that way you can compare lots and lots of different foods. And for salt, we're looking for foods that have less than 120 milligrams. It's actually called sodium on the label rather than salt, which again is confusing. But you're looking for less than 120 milligrams of sodium in 100 grams of a product. Some things you'll never be able to get that. Things like sauces, they'll have 1,000 milligrams per 100 gram. And some things will be easier to find that with that recommendation. But if you look at that, you can go for the lowest that you can get in when you're looking at a food category. But it is time consuming to do that, and it is a bit of a challenge reading it as well. So otherwise look for those things that do say low salt, reduced salt, and no added salt. And things that you can do at home are trying to add herbs and spices instead of salt. And other things you can do is going back to that sort of simpler message is eating more fresh food and less processed food overall. So I'll just talk a little bit about the Hart Foundation tick, and that sort of ties in a little bit with having a look at labels. The tick is designed really to make life a little bit easier in the supermarket because it is really overwhelming looking at food products. Because the tick, what that does is it identifies for you in a food category a healthier choice. So for example of the breads, it'll identify a bread that is a healthier choice in that particular category, so of all of the other breads. And the reason it is a healthier choice is because the manufacturer of that product would have worked with the team at the Hart Foundation tick team to really try and work to guidelines that the Hart Foundation set. So they set criteria for the salt and the saturated fat and the calories in the food, and their companies have to meet that to actually get the tick on their product. So that's how they get the tick. And then over time they're independently tested, so that they can keep the tick if they continue to meet that criteria. So it has over the years, it really encouraged food companies to reduce some of the things in their products like salt, for example. And it doesn't always mean that it's a healthy food. That's the other thing to remember. Some of there are some products like pies, for example, that have had the tick or have the tick that are what we eat every day. But what's important to remember, it's a healthier choice of the category, basically. And as a finish overall, I'd just really like to let you know that at the Hart Foundation we do have a health information service. So this is a phone call, it's a phone line that you'll have it in the show bags that you've got today, and it's a 1300 number. So if you do have any questions from my presentation today or about healthy eating or in relation to heart disease overall, you can call the health professionals that work for the Health Information Service. They're all trained and they can answer any of your questions. So thank you.